Good morning, everyone, and welcome to F1 Series, a conversation with team principals, presented by the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. And we are very honored to host Mr. Komatsu, the current team principal of Haas F1 Team, who has been with Haas since its inception. And today, he will share reflections on his remarkable journey through Formula One, from his engineering roots to leading one of the sport's most resilient and innovative teams. And I mentioned just now, we will do a 45 minutes of Q&A with some of the pre-submitted questions. And at the end, we'll be doing a 15-minute live Q&A with the audience. So by then, the audience feel free to submit in the Q&A chat box, and I'll be moderating that as well. And totally understand that a lot of our audiences, have other commitments. So if you have to drop off early, that's totally fine. We'll be recording the whole interview and releasing it on Chicago Business, our campus newspaper. So let us begin perhaps with Mr. Komatsu. Welcome with your
Thank you.
early career and journey into Formula One. You joined in early 2000s, where it's very different from what the sport is today. So I'm very curious, what kind of drew you first into motorsport and eventually Formula One?
Yeah, so that really happened long time ago when I was about 14. I always wanted to do something international.
Mhm.
And then I used to really like motorbikes because back then in Japan, mid 80s, let's say, everyone was riding motorbikes. It was so big. So when you're a teenager, you just ride motorbikes, right? And then you got to watch MotoGP.
Mhm.
And then I just came across a Formula One on TV. For some reason, it's a bit strange. As a kid, if you come across Formula One or MotoGP, naturally, that kids normally wants to be a rider or driver,
Yes.
right? But for some reason, I never thought that. I just wanted, I want to do this. I want to be an engineer. I want to make these cars.
Mhm.
And then I don't know why I thought that, but that's what I thought. And then I looked at motorbikes and cars because back then I loved motorbikes. But then I thought if I was an engineer designing a vehicle,
Mhm.
I thought, without knowing anything, which is strange as well, without knowing anything, I thought I can have more influence as a designer
Mhm.
in car racing than motorbike because motorbikes obviously rider in terms of weight as well is a
Mhm.
huge proportion of the total package and how the rider moves, how they shift the weight, etc. That influences the dynamics quite a lot. Whereas the car, obviously, driver in terms of mass is much smaller, right? So I thought I can do have more influence on the cars. So that's why I thought this is what I wanted to do, Formula One. So I was 14 then.
Can I maybe ask, when you were 14, which team were you rooting for when you were watching?
And back then it was a really good era of Ayrton Senna was driving for
Oh, yes.
McLaren Honda.
Ferrari, yep.
And then Alain Prost was 1 year driving for McLaren Honda.
And
The next year
Ferrari,
he
yep.
was driving for Ferrari. So that was the era I was watching. And then of course they had a Nigel Mansell, Nelson Piquet. So I wasn't rooting for one team, but to be fair, I always liked I did like McLaren Honda, but
Mhm.
then I really liked a team called Leighton House March because again, I found out later that was Adrian Newey's car.
Yes.
And then I remember in the French Grand Prix, Ivan Capelli, the Italian driver, he nearly
Yep.
won the race,
Mhm.
against all the big hitters. I think it's like only 12, 2 laps to go. Alain Prost of Ferrari overtook Capelli to win the race, but Leighton has finished second. So that was like the team stroke the car I really liked.
Yeah.
And then it's funny, like in the Goodwood this year, one of the festival, I saw that car and actually the Adrian Newey was driving the car. So I got to talk to him about it. So yeah,
That is super cool. And speaking of just how you mentioned engineering of the car, the technical aspect. So we know that you study engineering in the UK with a PhD in vehicle dynamics and control before joining Formula One. So Juan from our physics department are wondering, what were some key turning points that made your passion possible into pivoting into a career in Formula One?
yeah, but my starting point was I always wanted to do Formula One, like since the age
Mhm.
of 14. So the whole reason I came to UK was because I wanted to do Formula One. And I'm the kind of person like I cannot just study for the sake of studying, if you
Mhm.
like. Like my friend, he wanted to study just something hard,
Mhm.
difficult.
Yep.
Anything was challenge for him. But for me, I needed to know the application.
Mhm.
So whatever I was studying, either it's a physics or math or control theory or whatever, I needed to know that its application, how it's linked to my passion, which was
Mhm.
Formula One. So in that regard, when I had a placement, so in UK, after 2 years of university, you can have a industrial placement. So you go and work as a student for 1 year before you go back to uni for another couple of years. So at that in that place, the place called the Lotus Engineering, I was at the active control department. So where the Formula One used to have active suspensions.
Yeah.
So all those like ex-F1 engineers who worked on active suspension were in that department. And then that's where I really sort of like fell in love with the vehicle dynamics.
Hmm.
Because at university when I was studying just math, physics, dynamics, if I'm honest, it wasn't like so overwhelmingly exciting.
Hmm.
But once I did a placement at Lotus where I understand, okay, using these understanding of dynamics and physics, how I can model the car, how I can design the system, control system, suspension system, etc. That's where I really gained my insight and interest. So
Hmm.
from that point, I was really focused on, okay, I really want to focus on vehicle dynamics control and performance driver interaction. So that's where the specific interest grew.
Okay. And speaking of transitioning into Formula One, in your earlier career, with Renault, Lotus, so these teams are relatively smaller compared with the bigger ones, Ferrari, McLaren's, like you have mentioned, and it was the era before budget caps were in place. So what do you think are some of the maybe challenges with those more small scale teams than the bigger players? What were the kind of the differences that you had to adopt? Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because the very first team I joined was called the British American Racing Honda.
Car, right?
They were actually pretty big.
Hmm.
So I can't remember the total size, but I was in a vehicle performance group.
Hmm.
We had about 25 people. Then I was there for 3 years before I moved to Enstone. Enstone was what was used to be a Benetton. It was Renault F1 team, Lotus F1 team, etc. So I went there in 2006. So they won the championship with Fernando in 2005. I went there in 2006. And then that was really eye-opening because Enstone was much smaller than British American Racing. So like I said, at the British American Racing, I was in the department of 25 people.
Hmm.
I went to essentially the same department. I basically was hired to do the same job as a tire engineer. So the same department at Enstone who were winning the championship was only 8 people. So
Hmm.
one third.
Yep.
But then what I learned at Enstone was in a BR Honda, it was more like lots of department was in silo, communication wasn't great, global strategy wasn't communicated very well. Whereas in Enstone, back then had a really, really good senior engineer, senior people like Pat Simmons at trackside. Uh, Technical director was Bob Bell, deputy technical director James, head of aero, and then Flavio. Those people were the core backbone of the team, which
Yep.
was like 5 or 6 people, right? But if you wanted anything done, as long as you raise it to those 5 or 6 people, they had a very good alignment and communication, and they can action anything very, very quickly. So I think as a race team, I learned quite a lot in terms of like, okay, much smaller team, 8 people against 25 people in the same department,
Mhm.
but everything those 8 people did mattered.
Yeah.
Whereas at BR Honda, 25 people, so much of the jobs those 25 people is doing was lost, if you like.
Ah. Mhm.
So that's where I saw, it's not only about the size. Yes, of course, you need horsepower, you need number of people, but it's more about communication, alignment, efficiency. That's where I learned how the smaller team can beat the bigger teams.
Yeah, 100%. And I think this is a perfect segue into your career at Haas, right? Because like you said, sometimes you can have a very small team. If the organization is lean, if it's run efficiently, sometimes the David can be Goliath. So, I'm just wondering, when you were one of the definitely one of the biggest early joiners of Haas, and you really helped build a team from ground up. So, how was it like to be a part of this Formula One team when you can almost build it from scratch? Did you use any of the experience and the lesson you learned previously to kind of form the team?
Yeah, 100%. You have to use all your experience,
Mhm.
got to that point. So by the time I joined Haas, I've been doing Formula One for it's about 13 years, three
Mhm.
years at BR Honda, 10 years at the previous team, Renault F1 team. So yeah, you got to use everything you've learned. And
Mhm.
then yeah, starting up the new team was a really exciting challenge. I loved it, but if I'm honest, I don't want to do it again because it it's just incredibly hard work in the sense that physically you've got nobody, right? You're starting everything ground up. I remember one day I was writing some sort of summary email, right? Of the certain things we need to solve, certain things I discovered. Then halfway through writing this email, I stopped and paused and who am I sending this to? And I said, okay, I'm only just gonna send it to me. There's nobody else on the other side to action this. So it is very much hard work. And I remember building of the car before going to the first testing.
Mhm.
That was really brutal. Just not much sleep. You just very, very much hard work. Everything is a challenge. And I remember by the time we are leaving car build, right?
Mhm.
You just build one car,
Yeah.
fired up the engine. You haven't actually run the car, right? By the time I was leaving, I was totally exhausted. And then my teammate in the van, they were all completely sleeping in the van, go to the airport.
Yeah.
Then I felt like I've done pre-season testing, but then I realized, oh, we haven't even run the car yet. We haven't
Exactly.
even done
Exactly.
the wheel. Yeah, so physically it's really, really hard work. And then pre-season testing, honestly, I don't remember much. It was just one big hard work. And by the time we got to the first race in Melbourne,
Yep.
we are on our knees. And then Melbourne again, we didn't sleep much. And then some people's already left the team after the season. Sorry, after the pre-season testing
Fantastic. Yeah.
because they just couldn't handle it.
Mhm.
Just the pressure, workload, just the brutality of it. Then luckily, in our first race, we managed to score points. We had amazing race, finishing P6 with Roman Grosjean. And then I do believe that really saved lots of people resigning.
Mhm.
Because, no, 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 seriously, because Melbourne, it was brutal again. Didn't sleep much.
Mhm.
It's just non-stop. And then to have that race where we scored the points was incredible. That gave us energy to keep going.
Mhm.
But yeah, it was a very great experience. I wouldn't change it for anything to learn and be involved in setting up a team. It's
Mhm.
amazing experience. But if somebody asks me, like, do you want to start another new team?
Mhm.
No.
I see. So I'm just wondering, did you really breathe a sigh of relief? Do you think it's more after the testing where you see that the car is running smoothly, or is it really when you cross the finish line in Melbourne in your first race and score points? What do you think was the biggest joy from the perspective of an engineer and also as someone who's been working with Grosjean
I
before?
mean, biggest relief was for sure to finish the race in
Mhm.
Melbourne and scoring points because during Melbourne, so preseason testing is only with one car.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we had two tests, first test in Barcelona, second test in Barcelona again, but you don't run two cars.
Mhm.
So first race in Australia, Melbourne, is the first time we actually building two cars at the same time.
Mhm.
It may not seem like a big thing to do,
Mhm.
but it's actually a huge thing to be able to build two cars at the same time when you haven't done it before.
Yeah.
So to be able, obviously there's question mark of can we get the two cars ready to run for, first practice session.
Yeah.
So everything is a hurdle, right? And then back then qualifying session was very challenging in the way that you have to keep setting lap time because I can't remember exactly, but it's like almost like every minute
Mhm.
one driver gets dropped, but bumped off.
Yeah.
So
They
you
they
have to
changed that system later on, but yes, during
yeah,
that.
yeah. So
Yeah.
you have to turn the car around quickly and keep setting time. I knew that we couldn't turn the car around quickly.
Mhm.
Like if you're experienced team right now, 10 years in, in the qualifying, we can turn the car around in 40 seconds, no problem.
Yeah.
But back then, with lack of practice, everybody being new, it was taking like 2 minutes. Now
Mhm.
I knew that would be the
Mhm.
crucial factor. Then guess what? We were out because we couldn't get the car out in time. So again, even though that's what I expected, that's like, okay, this really happened. And in the race, you have a pit stop, right?
Yeah.
But then normally you practice pit stop from a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, all the way through. But because we are completely, used up our time just building a car, doing the basics, we never had a chance to practice it.
Wow.
So yeah, yeah, race would have been the first one. So we are all thinking, oh my God, we need to do live practice in a race for the first time. But again, luckily, with the red flag, we could change tires in the pit. So
Yes.
we started doing the live pit stop practice, no live pit stop in the race. We managed to complete the race and score points. So that was just a huge relief.
Yeah.
And then second race in Bahrain, we actually did very good live pit stops. And
Mhm.
then I think we did like a three-stop strategy. I can't remember very well,
Mhm.
but maybe two. And then we scored P5 again.
Yeah.
So that was a huge, let's say, uplifting factor for us.
100%. But speaking of, following the early success, very often then people have expectation. And I'm sure, the owner Jim Haas, has so much expectation and hope on the team. So especially given Formula One, how it's so resource intensive. So, Satvik from our business school is wondering, so how do you keep on performing, at such a competitive level in this, very resource intensive sports? And also, how does, Haas, have the resources and the money to keep on funding the innovation and upgrades to the car?
That's a very, very good question. I don't think we're doing it very well, to be fair, because honestly, it's one thing being efficient and being small. There's definitely a positives about being small.
Mhm,
Line of communication, we can make the decision quickly, we can be dynamic, agile, all that, and then minimizing the politics, minimizing the bureaucracy. But at the same time, what I call there's a critical mass.
mhm,
That I do feel we are below critical mass. We are less than third of the bigger teams. Most of the teams have more than 1,000 people,
exactly.
in on the chassis side. We are just around 300, just over 300. So we're not even half the size,
Mhm,
right? So that means essentially one person is doing three people's job at the bigger teams.
mhm,
So that cannot be efficient, right? And also people are stretched out to think, and also it's just not sustainable in terms of burnouts, etc. So I got to really manage, prioritize, really be brutal in prioritization.
yep,
If there's 10 things on the list, you really think hard and then do probably one or two,
mhm,
not
yep,
even three or four. So prioritization is really the key. And then also alignment, as a small team, if we are not all aligned, if
yep,
we are not communicating very well, if we are not supporting each other, working as a team, we stand no chance against bigger teams, right? So that's where I focus on. But at the same time, so that's why I think we can still produce the result that is better than what our team size suggests. Because if you just went by the size of the team, we should be dead last every single year,
mhm,
right? But that's not the case. So there is definitely a positives about how we set up. But at the same time, our target is in the next few years, we want to be competing in the front of the midfield
yep,
consistently,
mhm,
not just surviving sustainably, right? And
exactly.
also talking about innovation, the culture of innovation is here, but because everyone's so stretched out, there's not a huge amount of time for innovation, which is not
Mhm,
great, right? Which is not very inspiring either. So I want to be able to increase the size of organization a little bit so that it's a bit more sustainable. People can think about more what they're doing and the time for things like innovation. So that's my next goal.
yeah, 100%. And just as you mentioned, right, given the financial realities of the team, especially in the early years, there's a very strong collaboration with Ferrari. But that can also create some friction. For example, the very famous incident was in Walnuts, right, where two drivers very quickly, pitted and the tires weren't fitted perfectly, and that generated a famous quote in Drive to Survive. So what do you think, especially in the early years, because of the resources and how people are stretched, what do you think? Just now we talked about the highs of scoring points in the first race, but what do you think are some of the more frustrating aspects of some of the races because of the way that the team is set up?
Yeah, but it's not just about the Ferrari collaboration. For me, the Ferrari collaboration is our foundation,
Hmm.
really, because that was a very, very good model, at least to get the team off the ground,
Yep.
because no other teams were able to like survive more than 2 years.
Hmm.
They don't normally score any points,
For sure.
whereas in the first two races we scored points. So that business model was really good to get us off the ground. So
Hmm.
first 3 years, 2016, 17, 18, that were going very well. But then what we needs to be doing in the background in parallel, we need to be improving our capability, our understanding.
Hmm.
That means like its own investment, invest in the people, invest in the facility, etc. That's the bit like probably we didn't do it very well in let's say that year three to year seven, that kind of time.
Yep.
So we're doing it now, but we should be doing it 5 years ago. But
Hmm.
anyway, so it's not the business model itself. It's matter of like, okay, now we got us off the ground with buying as many components as possible from Ferrari. But in order to get maximum out of what you let's say buy, what you get supplied,
Yep.
you need to understand what you buy, right? But then, that means investing in people, investing in the software, investing in tools, etc. Then that's the next step. That's what we are doing. We are a lot better about understanding now, but For instance, we still buy suspensions from Ferrari.
Hmm.
We're not in a position yet to be able to make our own suspension. I'm not saying this is what we will do, but in terms of capability, to have another level of understanding, that's where we need to aim to, if you
Yep.
like.
That's great. And that actually leads very neatly to the next question that's asked by Amy from Data Science Department. Speaking of changes and new directions, with you now as the team principal, 2025 feels like a new chapter, right? New drivers line up, reshape technical team, and operating closer to the cost cap. So, what do you think is the biggest change that you've made, or that plan to implement to ensure that, like you said, the team can consistently fight for the points in not just this season, but also in 2026 ahead of the regulation change?
Yeah, I mean, I came to this position January last year,
Mhm,
so 24. My first focus, because I just knew that we had good people,
mhm,
but not necessarily been put together very well. So
mhm,
I just focused on the communication and listening. So I just spend lots of time straight away, just having as many one-to-one as possible
mhm,
in the UK, in Italy, because Italy basically our Italy office produces the car.
mhm,
And the simplistic sense, our UK office basically is the user of the car. So that both UK and Italy, I thought the location was the main issue. But
mhm,
then when I speak to people, when I listen to people, I realized, okay, location is not ideal, the fact that we have two different facilities, but main issue was just communication. So
mhm,
get to know people better, then communicate, align. So clear objectives, have to put out clear objectives and then back that up by a strategy and
mhm,
the executable plan, then closing the loop. So again, and also communication between track side team at the racetrack and design department, that wasn't great. So
mhm,
I really just focused on the communication, supportive, inclusive culture. We are still building that, but I think we are doing it well because if you look at how we can develop the car last year,
mhm,
we managed to develop the car very well.
mhm.
By the end of last season, we had the fifth fastest car.
Yep,
And then this year, we thought we were doing okay, but then first race in Melbourne, we had a huge shock that our car had a big fundamental issue.
mhm,
But then I was really pleased how everyone reacted. There's no blame culture, no finger pointing. Everyone accepted, okay, we got a big issue. What is the issue? Okay, we understand the issue. What we gonna do about it? How can we solve it in the short term? What can we do in the short term? What can we do in the medium term? What's the
mhm.
lesson done? So
Yep,
all that reaction was really pleasing. And then now we have a pretty competitive car
yep,
which can score points in every race if we operate well. So that side, I think, proves that putting people in the right places and then slightly structure to, let's say, force the communication,
yep,
but really building the culture of inclusivity, supporting each other,
mhm,
just communicate, simplify the message.
yep,
Then that's something clearly has worked, and then I just want to do that better. So if we can do that and then gradually increase the size of the team, but without losing that foundation,
mhm.
and then I think we can get to the point where we can fight at the front of the midfield every year.
100%. And just now you mentioned, right, from an organization point of view, how you want to structure the team, the lines of communication working together. And another very big part of the team are also, the drivers that's performing on track. So, Iqbal from our business school is wondering, how much time and effort do you, spend in terms of, managing the drivers as well as, negotiating drivers' contracts. So, how do you balance your time, effort, or even the company, the resources, the money into paying for the drivers versus the development and organization for the team?
Yeah, again, drivers are clearly the key to
Mhm,
the performance. Formula One is such a big team sport,
mhm,
which is something like some people may not understand. It is really is a team sport, but driver is a central piece of that. And then previously, before my time, so the one of the reasons that we couldn't develop the car very well for me was due to that communication. But communication, part of that communication is what driver said about the car at the
mhm,
track side was not really taken on board by the design team.
mhm,
So really, you got to put everyone on the same page on that. And I said to both drivers last year with Nico and Kevin, look, you guys are the only two people in the company who can feel
mhm.
what this car is like.
Yep.
And then you got to be playing the central part in developing the car.
Mhm,
And then to credit to both of them, they both really bought into it. They
Mm.
were driving the development with the engineers last year. So there's no lost in translation, So,
Yeah.
all the engineers, I created the opportunity that they hear it from the basically horse's mouth,
Mm.
without any filter. That was really important. And then both Nico and Kevin did a very good job doing that. So this year, again, I'm focused on the same thing. We got two new drivers, Esteban Ocon,
Yeah.
proven racer, still young but very experienced. Olivier Man, unbelievable talent, very
Exactly.
very young, 20 years of age, exciting guy. So we got a good combination, and then I just installed into them from day one. Look, you are part of the team. You
Mm.
need to be a team player. You need to be driving the team,
Yep.
and you need to be taking ownership of actually
Yep.
developing the car from your side. And then they are doing that, and then also like they thrive off each other in the sense that of course, drivers to be in the central of development, they feel good about it.
Mm.
And also our engineers and designers to be able to hear
Mm.
from drivers directly, that's a very motivating factor as well
Yep.
as clearly the key information.
Yep.
So again, that I do spend lots of time with drivers because they are such a key part of being making a successful team.
Yeah, 100%. Now, I started watching Formula One in early 2000s, and it is almost sad seeing that the driver's age was a lot older than me, and now it's a new generation of driver, like much younger. And speaking of Ollie Bearman, now he is now a very famous rookie that has really done incredibly well this season. So, as someone who has worked, with more experienced driver, what do you think are the biggest differences when you're working with someone who's officially entering their first ever Formula One season? What are the key differences from a team principal's point of view?
Yeah, key difference. Obviously, depending on the rookie, but if we just talk about Oli,
Mhm.
his speed is just no doubt. Without
Mhm.
any shadow of a doubt, he's incredibly quick,
Mhm.
very, very talented. Even last year when he stepped into for Kevin's seat in Azerbaijan and Brazil, he out-qualified Nico
Mhm.
both occasions. And then Nico at least last year, he was a great qualifier.
Mhm.
So that shows how much of a talent, how much of a speed he's got.
Yep.
But then for me, he's still a rookie. Every single circuit he goes to, it's a new experience. And Formula One, in terms of a pressure, nothing can really prepare for it
Mhm.
because just compared to any other formula, it's scale of difference is huge,
Mhm.
right? Then come with the pressure, and you need to deliver. But again, all the side, it's matter of really more managing the pace, managing the weekend. Give him the short-term objective so he's really clear what he needs to deliver every single session or even every single run because he responds very well to the short-term objectives.
Mhm.
But if I don't give him clear short-term objectives, in a simplistic way, he's too quick. He gets too excited. And he may, this is a bit simplistic way to say it, but then he may have a unnecessary crash, if you
Mhm.
like. Then that really sets him back 3 steps back.
Mhm.
So it's about working with him to understand what are the objectives, how he needs to build it up throughout the practice session, where he needs to be peaking, what's the approach. So it's been very difficult to be fair to put the weekend together. So many weekends, whether it's Zandvoort, Spa, Monza, Azerbaijan, at some point, even if he does like 99% of things right,
Mhm.
if he gets one thing wrong,
Mhm.
that destroys the weekend, such as the demand of Formula One.
Yep.
So it is hard, but like I'm very, very pleased that Singapore, he just put everything together.
Yep.
That was an amazing performance. So even though, bringing the car home in P9 may not sounds something really big thing to shout about, but in terms of how he managed the weekend, how he had a composure,
Mhm.
and then he managed his risks very well. That was a big step forward. So that's our aim to get him to do that every single weekend.
100%. And also speaking of, risk taking and competition with the drivers, right? I think, Haas famously previously had drivers, that, really are trying to outdrive each other with some of the, on-track competition or even some, some of the touches and crashes. So now looking at this season, what we have been talking a lot is, McLaren and, the papaya rules and how a team is supposed to handle this kind of competition, balancing between final results for the team as well as the fairness between the two drivers. So one thing for our physics department is asking, how do you deal with, the competition between the two drivers in the same team in the past was now in Haas.
Yeah, I mean, I think the situation at McLaren, who's fighting for the constructor championship as well as drivers championship, is a lot more difficult situation to manage. I have a sympathy for that compared to us in the sense that, our drivers are not in contention for drivers championship.
Mhm,
Our team is not contention for, world championship or P1. But, from day one, I've always been clear they are employees of the team.
mhm,
They are team member. Yes, two very significant team members,
mhm,
but they are just at the same time
mhm,
two of the 300 odd people.
mhm,
They've got responsibility, so they cannot drive into each other.
mhm,
But then for me, the most important thing is having that clarity, before they get in the car,
mhm,
before the season starts, complete clarity on the rule of engagement,
mhm,
and also respect and transparency. As long as you build that trust and respect between the team, myself, and the driver,
mhm,
any bad situation happens, if you got that foundation, you can deal with it, right?
mhm,
So we've been doing it very well this year. Then Silverstone, in the mid-season, both of our drivers ran into each other. That
mhm,
was very unfortunate in a tricky condition in the wet race, but then we just dealt with it straight away. Myself, both drivers, just three of us sat down in the room. I heard from both of them what they said. I said my point, but then I basically said to them, look, we don't need to decide, come to agreement now, but we need to come to agreement before the next two race, and then it's up to you guys to come to agreement. If you can, I'll make the rule. But it's better if you come to agreement,
mhm.
right? Because they're the one driving the car,
Yeah.
right? But I think because we've got the foundation in terms of respect
Mhm,
and trust, even though that Sunday night was a tricky conversation, heated conversation, we got that foundation. So
mhm,
so then they came to agreement.
mhm,
Guess what? From that point on was zero issue. So I think it's really important to have that clarity and trust and transparency.
mhm,
I think for me, everything is built on trust and
mhm.
respect.
Got it. And like you said, right, not every single conversation with the driver, so with the team is very happy. Sometimes
No,
it can be very difficult. So I'm
yes.
wondering, especially for example, like this year, right? Ollie, sometimes consistently finish just a little bit outside of the points, right? And all sometimes there are team touches, etc. So in those cases, like how do you also manage to motivate the team during those difficult patches to keep on moving forward and giving 100% to on-track performance?
No, no, that's a very good question. That's certainly the challenge I have. And then also, I have, like I said, I have like a 300 other people
Mhm,
with very different experiences, commitment, positions, etc.
mhm,
So I cannot expect same from everyone.
mhm,
That's the tricky bit for me. But then in terms of motivation, clearly, acknowledging and recognizing what we've done well
mhm,
before we talk about what we need to improve, what we didn't do very well. So, it's every single race, every single session, there's the things we've done really well. So
mhm,
I really trying to make sure that I recognize that. And also in terms of like showing let's say vulnerability in the sense that it's okay to make mistakes, as long as you learn from it. So sometimes I try to start from sharing my own mistakes, if
mhm,
you like, then talk about, okay, the mistakes we made in this session as a team,
mhm,
then what we need to do, or you need to come up with the solutions and make sure that we improve from this one. So it's just that balance, I think. And also, again, it's nothing's ever personal. So just making sure everybody understands that
mhm.
everything comes from the point of view of how can we be more competitive as a team,
Yep.
improve the team. So again, go back to our discussion about the drivers. As long as you build a foundation with the team that, look, our culture is not to blame people. Our culture is to respect, trust, and support each other.
Mhm,
Once we got that culture, then you are able to have difficult conversation. Because without that foundation, well, you got to have those difficult conversations. You cannot just say, "Oh, mistakes happen, but it's okay. It's gonna be better next time." It's not
mhm,
gonna be better
mhm,
unless you solve it, unless you identify why you made those mistakes and put things in place. But yeah, that foundation is very important. I'm still building it. It's not it doesn't happen overnight. So, but every single, let's say, instance or incident that happens, you got to stick to that, core value.
Yeah, 100%. And do you think your previous background, no engineering and in vehicle, do you think that helped you in making those decisions, having those tough conversations as a team principal?
I don't think so. I mean, well, not particularly. I don't say engineering. It's more about as a kid, before I met Formula One, I really wasn't into science or engineering. I
Mhm.
was more into literature, history,
Mm,
journalism. So I wanted to be either a storyteller or journalist.
wow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. When I was a kid, I used to write stories and send it to newspaper
Mhm,
and competition stuff. But so I was always interested in human being. And then I think to directly answer your question about basically every single experience you got in your life, you
mhm,
got to use it to, help manage these situations
mhm,
because there's no black and white answers, right?
mhm,
But it's very, very important that you really look at the situation in front of you. There's no rule book other than the fact that for me, foundations like we've been talking about
mhm.
is something unnegotiable,
Yeah,
respect, trust, transparency, supporting each other, integration. That's not negotiable. But other than that one, how to deal with each situation, depending on the group of people you're talking to, depending on the person you are talking to, you're
mhm,
addressing the whole team. It's different how you need to manage.
yeah.
So you got to use every single life experience you've got, I think, to have a chance of delivering it correctly.
For sure. So maybe now, I know there are lots of audience want to asking questions. Maybe I'll just finish with a couple more. So, looking like on elevated level, let's switch gears for a bit. Ever since Liberty Media, right, they acquired, Formula One, and that gave rise to the, Drive to Survive. I think for a lot of people online now, they probably, first enter Formula One through the TV series. So what do you think as the biggest positives and negatives with this modern era of Formula One that focus a lot more on entertainment and drivers as celebrities?
Yeah, I think the clearly positives for me is again when I was a kid looking at Formula One, yes, I was interested in something international, but it was the human drama that
Mhm.
really caught my let's say eyes, if you like, or attention, because that was like I said, Ayrton Senna versus Alan Prost
Yep.
era. And then there was lots of dramas going on. The
Yep.
whole thing was fascinating. And then quite often before Formula One only caters for people who are really into cars, motor racing,
Yep.
but then they didn't really put the human side up front. So I think that's what Netflix done really, really well.
Mhm.
The same people who did that Senna documentary, right?
Yep.
So I saw the idea of putting those human side, personal side
Mhm.
up at the front was really a great idea because that's how I think people relate to, I
Yep.
think, emotionally connects to. So that was great. And then it's really great to discover new audience, really.
Mhm.
And I think it's only really good to have a very different dimension. So for instance, if you look at let's say, I don't know, 15 years ago, lots of, I love traditional racetracks, by the way, don't get me wrong,
Mhm.
but it was always the similar types of events
Yep.
where let's say hardcore, really into Formula One type people
Yep.
can enjoy. But if you're not really into it, you
Mhm.
don't know what's going on. There's
Yep.
nothing much to enjoy.
Yep.
Whereas now, catering to all these new audiences, much younger audience, female audiences,
Mhm.
much more diverse audiences. It's
Yep.
really good in the sense that we have 24 races,
Mhm.
but like if you go to Miami, it's a completely different vibe.
Yep.
It's set for the audience who's much more, let's say, interested in what should I say? May not be the core part of the racing, but more
Yep.
about the purely driver meeting celebrities or enjoying the atmosphere
Mhm.
or thing than if you go to a traditional race like a Spa-Francorchamps in Belgium.
Yep.
They're the hardcore people camp
Yes.
through the muddy rain and everything and watching every single session and understanding the lap time and everything. So I think it's only great that we are catering for such a diverse audience.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. Negatives, negatives could be negatives is that sometimes like if I talk about Netflix, honestly, like I said, they've done really well in putting the human element up front.
Mhm.
Sometimes their narrative is so far away from the truth.
Mm, yes.
So that but then I spoke to them about it. I don't mind you guys having a narrative because it's a TV documentary series
Yep.
and then you got to make a drama. So the narrative can be slightly off-piste. For me, it cannot be 180 degrees different. Then
Uh-huh.
it's just a lie,
Yeah.
right? So that's the balance. But I think all in all, I'm very, very positive. It's honestly thanks to those new way of thinking, Netflix, Drive to Survive, etc. We're
Mhm.
reaching out to so many new audience in a different area, generation, which is really exciting. So it's really nice to see. And then let's face it, here, USA, previously F1 tried to crack USA for many, many years. Couldn't do it, right? But with Liberty Media and Netflix and everything, it's amazing. We have 3 races in USA. And
Exactly.
if you look at Miami, Austin, which is where I am now, and then Vegas in several weeks' time, all these 3 US races, they have a very different atmosphere, different
Mhm.
feel to it,
Yep.
which is great. So no, I'm really happy to be in this era of Formula One. There's lots of excitement.
Exactly. And actually, on that note, we're actually applying for media accreditation for Formula One for Chicago business. So
Okay,
hopefully the next time I interview you, we might be doing it in person in Las Vegas.
that'd be great.
And just now, right, so a lot of our audience are so excited to ask you a lot of questions. So feel free to type in the Q&A, and I'll be moderating them. So just now you mentioned a diverse audience array, right? So Claire Dennis from our business school is asking, so what do you think, Haas and other Formula One teams should play in promoting more women in motorsport, both as maybe not just audiences, but also as engineers and drivers? For example, now we see there's a Formula One Academy, etc. But what do you think Haas as a team can do more?
Yeah, I think I think it's got to be natural process if you like.
Mhm,
And then for instance, this year we actually have a first female race engineer in Formula One. So the race engineer for Esteban Ocon is a female.
mhm,
But then so there's been so much interest. But then to full credit to her, I didn't pick her because she's female.
mhm,
She simply was the best two candidates we had. We changed both race engineers. So Laura is on Esteban's car. The Irish guy called Ronan
mhm,
is on Oli's car. But
mhm.
those two guys, regardless of their gender, they were the best candidates in my eyes. And then they are proving it this year. So, but it's really great that people like Laura, she now happened to be the first female race engineer.
Mhm,
And then now we recently hired another female engineer to be on the track side as well. But
mhm,
honestly, we don't focus on hiring females or anything. But I think because Formula One is reaching out to such more diverse community,
mhm,
generally the interest from females increased, which is great. So there's more female engineers trying to make it to Formula One. That naturally increase the chance of them getting to it and then doing making uh, such as a significant position. So
mhm,
I think it's great that it's happening and then more and more will happen. And also I have two young kids who is doing go-karting just for fun. But when I see the kids in go-karting, there's so much diversity.
mhm.
Female go-kart kids, they're not unusual anymore. You don't even say like, oh, there's a girl racing. No, because it's just norm, which is great, right? So I think it's got to happen organically, but the fact that we are reaching out to such a wider group of a community is
Yeah.
helping. So it's only a good thing.
Awesome. And speaking of participating in Formula One, I think for almost all of us online now, we're a bit too old to become drivers in the future. But so what kind of advice would you give to, for example, some of the engineers that's, studying engineering at U Chicago who's online? If they aspire to work in the Formula One world, but currently they don't have a path, in, what kind of advice would you give for them?
Honestly, advice is just believe you can do anything and then try it. Just to think about what your next step should be and then just try it without thinking about the consequence or result or what if I didn't make it. So for instance, like when I was 14, when I met this Formula One, I instantly thought I want to do this. And then guess what? Apart from my parents, everybody told me, don't be so stupid. You will never make it. Don't bother. Go to university, Japan, get a job. I ignored all those people, right? I'm so happy I ignored all those people, but I'm also so happy that I'm grateful that my parents said, okay, if that's what you want to do, just have a go, try it,
Mhm,
right? And then when you're a kid, you don't think about failures. You
mhm,
don't think about, oh, how difficult is it? You only find out the next step when you make the first step, right?
mhm,
So it's no point sitting here still and thinking, oh, what's my step number 10 looks like.
mhm.
You only understand step number 10 when you go to step number 9, if you
Yeah.
like. So for me, just the thing I say to people is just that if you got something you want to do, like if it's Formula One, doesn't matter what it is, just make your first step. That's the most important thing. As long as you make your first move, your whole new world opens,
Yeah.
and then you decide what your second step would be. Whereas if you think about it too much, if you don't move, nothing is gonna happen. So just for me, just if you got something you wanna do, just for sure you can do it. Just believe you can do it. Believe in yourself. Then just try it.
Okay, well, in that, the follow-up question is, is Haas hiring internships or full-time opportunities for high performing university students? If so, please let us know.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks so much. Yeah. And I think a lot of people online are asking this question. I think so now, Formula One is becoming more data-driven. We have simulation, telemetry, or even sometimes AI to incorporate race strategy to, predictive modeling and the whole vehicle performance. So do you think, those software and programming innovation will kind of be driving a lot of the future, performance in the car?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think so. And as a team, again, this is another thing, somebody asked a question about innovation before. As a team, because we are so small, but we're not putting enough effort in innovation. But so I know that we are behind on things like AI, machine learning,
Mhm.
but we are starting on it. There's lots of other teams, they are years into it. So we
Mhm.
got lots of catching up to do. But it's just the rate of improvement in that area is staggering, amazing, right? So we really needs to work hard, otherwise we're gonna get left behind. But it's an exciting time.
Mhm.
These new technologies coming, and then there's still in a complex application like Formula One, there's still a lot to learn about
Yep.
how to apply those technologies. But it's changing so quickly. So again, in a way, it's a amazing time to be a, let's say, student young engineer, because what I always find is those people graduating from university, they've got the latest knowledge and technologies, right? And they're like a sponge, absorbing so quickly and moving so quickly. So yeah, I think it's a great, exciting time to be where you are, I think.
Exactly. And speaking of no changes and new innovation, now 2026, right? We saw complete overhaul in rule change. Do you think you will have those no brown GP moments in 2009 where suddenly there's something that's unthought of before and that will have a huge underdog moment?
It's possible. Certainly, it's possible because it's the biggest regulation change as long as I can think of.
Hmm.
2014 was the big regulation change, but that was on a power unit only.
Hmm.
And then current generation of the ground effect car that happened in 22, was it?
Hmm.
That was on the aerodynamic side only. But this time we're doing it both PU side
Yeah.
and the aero side all together. So
Yeah.
that's a biggest regulation change for
Mhm.
as long as I can remember. So undoubtedly, some people will be ahead than others by some margin, I think. But
Yes.
I think in the F1, as it always happens, people run so quickly.
Mhm.
So, but to start off with, I think you will see a very different landscape.
Yeah, awesome. And also, again, speaking of 2026, finally we see a new team, Cadillac, entering the Formula One world. And then so so Haas is almost no longer the new kid on the block, only the US team. So how do you kind of differentiate Haas now that we have two American teams competing on track? So how does in terms of branding or identity, like how do you think Haas will stand out?
Yeah, I think we definitely need to do a better job of telling our stories. But in terms of identity, as far as we are concerned, is pretty simple. Cadillac is a corporate.
Mm-hmm.
We are not corporate. We are completely opposite of that.
Hmm.
And we are owned by the guy called Mr. Gene Haas, just a
Yep.
private individual. So we are privately owned race team. We are
Mhm.
not corporate.
Yep.
That again, it's interesting talking with people like Toto over Mercedes. Toto said to me, that his team's becoming so corporate. He's trying to almost go to our direction. We need to go more towards his direction, right? Because we are too small. So there must be a good middle ground, if
Yes.
you like. But I think in terms of differentiating who we are, it's pretty simple. We are private race team,
Hmm.
pure and simple race team, not corporate.
Hmm.
And then who can do things very dynamically, bold, not afraid of failure, being very agile. So all that is our identity. So I think we need to really do better in terms of telling that story, but that's who we are. So differentiating from a Cadillac is very easy.
Yeah, awesome. And also, just again, this leads us very nicely to the next audience question. So obviously, the owner of the team is Jing Haas, but he doesn't previously. I think with his relationship, he doesn't do a lot of the day to day or on track for the whole team versus, let's say, McLaren, which almost have this dual leadership between, the CEO as well as the team principal, right? So what do you think, with this kind of structure, like, something that's more concentrated on a team principal versus McLaren with Brown and Stella? So what do you think, does that kind of affect the team's performance on track or as an organization?
I think each organization have different, let's say, strengths and weakness.
Mhm,
And then clearly at McLaren, their way of setting up the team with Zach Brown being a CEO,
mhm,
focused on the business commercial side, and Andrea as a team principal focused on the technical side, that's clearly working. But that's not to say that that model is going to work everywhere else either. Right. So I think you got to look at each team's setup, how it's set up differently, but the what kind of people they've got, where the strengths and weaknesses are. So for me, if there's 11 teams, could be 11 different ways of doing it. Even though if you say, let's say, okay, I'm from engineering background, let's say Aston Martin, Andy Cowell, he's from engineering background, but the way Aston Martin set up and the way we are set up is so different.
mhm,
What Aston Martin needs from team principal is very different from what Haas needs from me.
mhm.
So I think you got to look at each organization, but certainly the way McLaren's doing it with the split between Zach and Andrea is working very, very well.
Got it. And also, speaking of different teams, another big difference is the budget that they have, right?
Mm.
Traditional big team to have such a big advantage, but now we see the limits of in-season testing, the time with the wind tunnel, as well as the budget cap that was introduced. So, do you think these kind of no rules kind of make the playing field a bit more level for teams such as Haas? Did it achieve its intended results?
Good question. So I don't know if you know, but budget cap changing for next year. Yeah, but that's because the budget cap intention is very, very good.
Mhm,
And then for sure it's better to have it than not having it. But
mhm,
at the same time, it's very, very difficult to write such a regulation,
mhm.
right? Without any loopholes. Of course, there's plenty of loopholes and gray areas.
Yep.
So of course people are exploiting that. So for sure, I can say of today, it's not a level playing field whatsoever.
Mhm,
But that's not to complain. Everybody is given same set of rules.
mhm,
Some people are more clever to exploiting it more than others, and some people's got resource to do that. But
mhm,
then next year, those let's say loopholes are really much more reduced.
mhm.
So it should be even better. But then again, that means our budget cap is higher. So from our side, we need to find more revenue. So
Yes.
yeah, yeah. But no, ideal budget cap is good for sure. It's much better to use the money responsibly for sure. Whereas Formula One of let's say 20 years ago, people coming in unlimited budget. And then of course doesn't buy you success, does it?
Mhm,
So for me, money is definitely a necessity,
mhm,
requirement to have a chance of being
mhm.
successful. But money for sure does not guarantee success. No way.
Yeah, thank you. Again, I want to say thank you so much for your time today. I know this we have a couple minutes left, so we'll end with a couple of rapid fire questions. So
Okay.
please make your answer as short as possible, and that's how we'll end. So let's go.
Okay.
Favorite racetrack to compete and to watch?
Suzuka,
So three words to describe Haas Formula One today.
race team, dynamic, and then board.
One word to describe each of your current drivers.
That's difficult one. Only just a young, exciting kid. I'm sorry, it's not one word.
Uh,
Esteban, 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 so such a complicated character. Okay, let's say complicated,
complicated.
not
What
very
about
good, but
Romain, Magnussen, and Nico?
Nico,
Yeah.
it's one word answer. It's so difficult. Nico, very professional. So let's say professional.
Mhm.
Kevin, in a good way, aggressive.
Aggressive, yeah. And
Yeah.
also Romain. Come on. Yeah.
Roman's just, let's say, so naturally talented. So I say natural.
Okay.
Yeah.
Your favorite Formula One memory of all time?
Uh, for, wow, I've got so much memories.
Mhm,
But I guess when Roman drove in Suzuka 2013,
mhm,
when Roman led the race for like half the race,
mhm.
then I was a race engineer. That was amazing.
Awesome. So on race mornings, tea or coffee?
Oh, coffee.
Coffee. If you weren't in motorsports, so what would you be doing? Journalism or?
I'd say no. I'd have said journalism 30 years ago. I would have not now. I'll be climbing mountains.
Awesome. So one thing, what's the most surprising thing fans will be to learn about your job that no one probably knows?
It's so difficult. I don't know. I don't know. Um, how multidimensional it is?
Okay. So have you watched yourself on Drive to Survive?
No chance. No.
No chance? Okay. And what's your favorite part of the race weekend?
Qualifying. Absolutely
Qualifying.
qualifying. Yeah. It's
That's
so short and intense. Yeah.
awesome. That's all the question we have today. Again, thank you so much, Ayo, for sharing your time and insights with us. And thank you everyone online for joining us. It's been a true privilege hearing your journey and your perspective on your Formula One's evolution. And again, I want to especially thanks to Media, Entertainment, and Sports Group for making this event possible. And on behalf of the University of Chicago and the wider student body, again, thank you so much for joining us. We wish you continued success in the season ahead. And arigatou gozaimasu. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank
Have
you,
a good day.
everyone.
Bye
See you.
bye. Bye.